Okay, apologies. It seems we had a encoder crash, and I'm just putting up a message there about it. Okay, I see people have sort of stayed around, reconnected. I'm gonna give Douglas the link. He's just gone off to refresh a bit, and yeah, it looks like we're constrained for bandwidth, and that's where the buzzing was about, and kind of unfortunate, but we'll have to attack this and mitigate somehow for the future. But right now we'll have to go through this process. So I think it's because right now it's about 10 o'clock, 10:30 Eastern. It's about the peak time when the internet is being used, and a lot of people are streaming and so on, and so we're having kind of outages, a bit of outages. But why the encoder crashed, I'm not sure. Either it overloaded or can't tell. It's the only second time it happened in all the time I've been streaming with Douglas. Okay, I see you guys are all starting to reconnect and find your way back. Okay, so let me give Douglas the link, and when he's back, he's gonna publish it to Facebook. Right, Douglas. And what I'll do is actually I'll publish it, and I'll tag Douglas in it so that it'll show up on his timeline.
I'm back. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate your taking the initiative and taking over. We couldn't do any of this without Pavel. I want to thank all of the lovely ladies who are providing myself information as to our status. And of course, this includes everybody. Ramona Halitha Henry was the first to report in on the problem. Getting feedback as well from the lovely, my Crown Princess of the Pacific over there, Judith Aker. Hopefully later on she can hear the recording, catch up on the shout-outs. And of course, anyone else who's helping us. Let me refresh my timeline, see if the links have gone up, and see if they're taking hold, so to speak. And I believe our man Pavel is putting new links up for people to link to. Oh, yeah, let's see what's going on here. Okay. Oh yeah, don't forget to give me the new link, and I'll transfer it too. I'll put it in different places it needs to be.
It's dropped in your Skype.
You tagged it. Yeah, great.
And I just tagged it now. Yeah.
Got it. Good.
I think it'll possibly.
So take your time. I'm going to.
I think it may be the same URL, but I'm not sure. Anyway.
Well, let me just go down there and take that YouTube link, and I will, of course, test it out of habit, and then transfer it over to our own links and renew that link with everybody, and hopefully they'll all catch up. Just give me just a second here, people. Everybody be patient. I want to thank you all. And Pavel, feel free to entertain us, if you will, with or maybe you got too many other responsibilities going on, I take it.
yeah. When it gets to a time like this where there is sort of the bandwidth constraints, and I start to try and outthink what can be done, but my usual bag of tricks didn't really do anything. It's it just so I realized the buzzing is now when we're really just squeezing the bandwidth here, trying to go from yourself to myself and then back to YouTube. It just dwindles, and like I say, we're at a peak period of use right now. I would say being about 10:30 right now on the Eastern Standard Time. So, but right now it's cleared up, and I'm wondering in the future, I meant to bring this up and I forgot about it, but what we might do in the future, I think it might be good to at some point disrupt the stream or have some way of, just restarting it. And I was thinking about the 4-hour period. So when we get to about 4 hours, because we have a delay on the stream that YouTube allows is a 4-hour delay. It's not a delay. It's where it keeps it back uh, backlog of the stream so that people can jump around in the time and still listen. But once we pass over the 4 hour mark, which for me is midnight, and for yourself would be, I think, 9 o'clock, is when YouTube generally also gives us trouble, which is a little bit unusual because the peak time is over. So, and I think it might have to do with that, but it's difficult. It's, you know, I have to speculate. I don't have any definite answers. All I have is to watch what's going on and observe. And over the times we've done this, I've noticed that, yeah, sometimes for me after midnight, after we pass the about 4 hour streaming mark, that sometimes we develop certain problems where we get outages, and not outages, but like what it is that the stream kind of plays catch up from going from the encoder out. So maybe we might in the future consider just taking like you know, it could be a few minute break, 5 minute break, could be even a 20-minute break at what would be midnight Eastern time, and then just restart the stream and finish whatever we like. That's one consideration. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying we have to. I mean, generally, you know, there are nights where we just go 7 hours, close to 8 hours, and without real disruption, then YouTube records it and that. But we've also had nights where 2-3 restarts also occurred. Okay, but right now we're sounding good. So yeah, it did improve. The fact that it interrupted, and it was experiencing
everybody's
it was experiencing troubles for the last hour, I would say, and I was like going, I wish that would stop. I was getting real frustrated because usually I've managed to somehow I like load a page and the buzzing goes away, but wasn't having any luck in the past hour. And I was about to even start typing to you. I was going to say, man, it's getting back. I wonder if we should try and do something, because I notice people, you know, if people are coming by, browsing by, and they start listening and they get into it, but the buzzing might turn them off. So I noticed that a few people jumped off the stream and went to do something else, which is a shame, because this is a very in-depth, yeah, exactly what I think people want to know and learn. So, but right now we seem to be good. So,
oh, bless you. Thank you. Well, we definitely are, brother, and it's thanks to you. And I want to, of course, thank everybody who's giving us feedback. I want you to know as well, Pavel, that they're hearing us on the old link, that we actually are being heard on the old link. So we seem to have come back on that link as well as the new one. Isn't that interesting? So I don't know what you make of that technically, but that means that the people can access us either way. So both sides are open as avenues. Yeah, and I want to, of course, thank you so much, Ramona, for those updates every moment. And as for my lovely little princess on the garden island of Kauai, Judith, honey, don't know why you've got that little disintegrating broken heart there. I mean, honestly, I'm sorry you missed the opening. You can play back later and hear that shout out to yourself, but I'm giving you one now, and one richly deserved. So hopefully she can join us for the rest of the transmission as long as she can stand. Well, I want to let people know that I've been informed by Sarah Shields, lovely young lady. Mwah, happy New Year to you, honey. That we are that we cut off at the moment I said that 2019 is the year of the pig and shit. And so that is a propos. And yeah, people will be able to catch up on what I said about the year of the dog on the recording. No need to go into it, but what I was saying was we needed to understand yesteryear, the year of 2018 being the year of the brown earth dog, before we got a comprehension of what was going on this year. And since you're all kind of back, and maybe those of you won't listen or have time to listen to the recording later, I'll reiterate a little bit because people are asking me to do that. So earth and water have two combinations in the Chinese I Ching. By the way, we are hearing your keyboarding, Pavel, just so you know. You might want to go mute. So our, yeah. Okay, thank you. I see. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, yes. So that people understand the ancient Chinese I Ching. Yeah. Okay, bless you. Thank you, dear brother in battle. The ancient Chinese I Ching, or that fortune-telling instrument of divination that is so central to the plot of the Man in the High Castle novel. I don't know if they've somehow integrated that into the television series. Obviously, this had a profound effect on the author Philip K. Dick, the same man who wrote the basis for Blade Runner, the stupid novel, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. But otherwise, we have a man who did a lot of consciousness experimentation, experiments in consciousness. And because of that, the I Ching became profound to his concept of parallel realities. And so in terms of the Chinese I Ching, within it, earth and water have two combinations as elements. One be that water, like a river, flows on the ground and be a resource for living. People will gather around the rivers. This is a sign of prosperity. The other case be that water is under the ground, where people will look for water as a resource. And water represents danger in the I Ching. This be a sign of disputation or war. So the year of the pig contains yang wood. Yang wood be a very tall tree or stout wood. Yang wood can be a boat flowing on the river. Water represents wisdom in the Chinese 5 elements theory. And the pig makes you smarter because pigs are so intelligent, the most intelligent mammals, more so than monkeys and other primates, aside from us, on the surface world. Now, if the yin earth brings you trouble, you might find a solution from yang wood and flow with the river in a boat of your own making or crafting. So when it comes to this year of the brown earth pig year, it's the year of the unbelievable and the unexpected, and it is known as the landslide pig. So with this in mind, and you take into account the Chinese 5 elements of metal, water, wood, fire, and earth, that cosmology, the earth be related to brown, and this be the brown earth pig year. Earth has yin, female, and yang, male elements. The yang are male elements being the metals or the strategic resources of the earth, the oil, the crystals. The yin earth be more wet soil, flatland, or farmland, the agricultural earth that produces yields, the good earth that produces crops. And the Chinese zodiacal pig is within the water group, mixing with water. Wet soil becomes sticky and muddy. Therefore, 2019 is the year of the muddy pig, the year of the pig in the waller, the year of the pig in shit. So when you comb the Chinese 5-element astrology and derive inspiration from the I Ching of elements of nature, then how they will impact your career, your income, and wealth throughout this brown pig year is pivotally decided already by the exit of the brown earth dog year, yesteryear, which ended the day before yesterday. So to predict our future in 2019, look back at what happened in 2018. I predicted that 2018 was to be the roller coaster year of the brown yang earth dog, the brown male dog, and yang earth be connected to mountains as opposed to yin with flatlands and valleys. So the dog is in the earth group. 2018 was the year of the mountain dog, which meant that because the dog contained the yang earth elements as a mountainous entity, the sign of 2018 was twin peaks. One mountain faces another mountain. Earth itself be connected to lines drawn on the map, the boundaries and borders of nation states. All nation states are drawn on the good earth to cordon off as a perimeter of defense which land belongs to a nationality or an ethnos or a culture or a civilization, and therefore the peaks year of 2018, a mountain-facing mountain, meant international confrontation, two superpowers challenging each the other. So 2018 was a very strong Earth year of the Sino-American trade war between the communist Chinese and the Russian puppets in occupation of America. Now, people generally had good fortune in 2018 if their Chinese astrology lucky element was the Earth. So people did prosper in 2018. But 2019 is the year of the landslide pig. The year of the brown female or yin earth pig, yin or feminine earth, connected to flatland, the valley. The pig containing yang water and yang wood, masculine elements of water and wood. Yang wood means tall tree like a redwood, and the yang water is the river or rushing water. So the sign of 2019 is the river flowing towards the flatland, into the valley. A flash flood that will flash away the topsoil that produces food, and ergo, therefore, generate famine. So the transition from Yang Earth Dog of 2018 to Yin Earth Pig of 2019 is mountains collapsing down into the flatland with the flood. We're going to face something as similar, at least metaphorically, as cataclysmic and as paradigmatic collapsing, as world-changing as the Great Flood of Noah. It implies something unexpected and unbelievable will happen. Flash flood and the collapse of the mountains into the valley. Big companies, or someone doing strong and well to this point through 2018, could encounter big frustrations. If they don't have a plan for unexpected fiascos, then this 2019th year of our Lord, this Chinese zodiacal or Sinoviet zodiacal pig year, will become the landslide year of the mud flood. The Yin Earth Pig of 2019 is equivalent to the I Ching hexagram 7, water under earth, groundwater, Shi division. Xin means the division of an army. Water be the resources for living. A land, a nation, needs water. In I Ching, water be connected to danger. This implies nations will war for resources, money, sea and land, maritime territories, or expansion of land power throughout this year. People, of course, require discipline, wisdom, and leadership to solve problems. But the most important thing be that people must adhere to morality and ethical principles to win proper reputation and wealth. In 2019, most people will focus on income, properties, finance, and the economy. So, in terms of your career, your finances, your wealth, and the global economy, global economic prospects should continue to strengthen, but the risks have increased by orders of magnitude. The United States unemployment rate in the United States declined to 3.7% in my own birth menses, my birth month of October, yesteryear in 2018. The unemployment rate of 3.7% was at a 49-year low. The new United States lower tax rates were intended as an incentive to help companies save more money and hire more employees. But instead, the overwhelming majority of the companies that count have sent thousands of workers home yesteryear in 2018 and planned the same strategy for all the years to come, their grand strategy being to downsize to greatness by firing everyone other than the money-sucking plunderers at the top who will automate 100% and render their employees obsolete. Verizon Wireless will lay off 44,000 longtime employees. Transfers of thousands of jobs to India are intended as their stated objective until 2021. IBM laid off 20,000 United States workers over the age of 40 in the last 5 years and has attempted to import 37,000 foreign workers into the United States to take U.S. jobs. Deutsche Bank is planning to lay off as many as 10,000 employees, or 10% of its workforce, through 2020. In April of yesteryear, 2018, AT&T announced the cut of at least 4,600 jobs. So throughout this year, the future forecast be that the trade war between the United States and Communist China continues. Higher tariff threats will impact many United States and Chinese companies. Ford Motor is already preparing for over 20,000 mass layoffs worldwide after losing $1 billion United States dollars already to Trump's trade tariffs. General Motors announced 14,000 job cuts in November of just yesteryear, 2018, just yesterday for all intents and purposes. Hewlett-Packard Incorporated has planned job cuts between 4,500 to 5,000 employees by the end of the first fiscal cycle of 2019. JCPenney, Macy's, Sears, and Walmart have all planned to eliminate about 5,000 positions each. And in Communist China, millions of job positions are missing. According to China's National Bureau of their statistics, the urban, meaning the city unemployment rate in China, which is a world unto itself. This is not the national Chinese unemployment rate, but rather the unemployment rate in China's economic powerhouse, its cities. There, the unemployment rate in all municipalities has reached 5.1% yesteryear. That means at least 50 million Chinese have been out of a job since Trump launched his trade war. Now, I'm not focusing on the negative news. The forecast, based on the Chinese zodiacal system, the Sinoviet calendar, and the astrology behind it, from which the calendar itself be derivative, this be for people to prepare for bad weather. 2018 was a roller coaster year for many people. Many people lost their jobs in the spring, despite all of the talk of high employment. Many of them almost certainly, supposedly, found different positions later, according to the United States itself, based on its assertions of low unemployment rates. So some people obviously have steady positions, but they lost their jobs before Christmas, or they'll lose their jobs this year before the Christmas of 2019. If the global economy continues to grow and the stock market continues to climb, then people shouldn't worry too much about their jobs. But what we have is the potential for either trade war or truce peace between the United States and China. That's the key to the global economy. Trucial peace will bring us prosperity. Trade war will collapse us and will suffer the mud flood. Now, President Donald Trump and President of China, Xi Jinping, have declared a truce on new tariffs as trade talks continued for 90 days during the G20 leaders meeting in December of 2018. That was good news for job markets. But Donald Trump is batshit fucking crazy, and in his madness presents himself as master of the deal. Nobody knows when Donald Trump will change his mind during or after the negotiations. If trade talks break off without a deal, the company profit margins of both superpowers will be trimmed drastically. This will continue to threaten the world's economic growth and then impact the job markets and the stock markets. And unfortunately, in this age of Antichrist, in this age of apocalypse, the key person to drive the global economy be President Donald Trump. So that brings us to the Chinese astrology of Donald Trump himself. That might give us some foresight as to what his fate or destiny will be in this year of the brown female earth pig. Now, many people have asked me about the possibility of Donald Trump impeachment back in 2018, back in yesteryear. And of course, we have the answer in the conclusions of his zodiacal forecast based on synovial divination. Basically, 2018, and there I go again with a Daniel Arolism, and Arolism, I guess I'll call it, like an embolism. Basically, 2018 being, as it was, the Chinese brown earth dog year, the dog was in the earth group. 2018 was a very strong earth year. The element of earth is the lucky element of Donald Trump's zodiac. During that year, yesteryear, Trump negotiated better trade deals with Mexico, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Europe, and China, according to his propaganda. He propagandized himself as somehow basically one-upping all of these nation states, all of these world powers. And the U.S. unemployment rate in the United States declined to 3.7% in October of yesteryear. The unemployment rate of 3.7% was a 49-year low. And as of November yesteryear, the general polling reported that more voters opposed the impeachment of President Trump than those that supported it for a period of time. So he did well in 2018, but the presidential job approval ratings of Donald Trump are now much lower than average for U.S. presidents, always have been. So when you look at it from the zodiacal perspective, the year of the pig starting the day before yesterday, and the year itself being that of the female earth pig in Chinese 5 elements of metal, water, wood, fire, and earth cosmology, earth be related to brown, and earth has female and male elements, yin and yang, the female earth being wet soil, flatland, or farmland, the element of earth be favorable to Donald Trump. Now, the first half of 2019, he will handle it probably as well as he did in 2018, if well can be the word that's applied. But the Chinese zodiacal pig be of the water elemental group. Water is not a lucky element for Donald Trump. Mixing with water, wet soil becomes sticky and muddy. So the second half of 2019 will be the pig and the waller, where many of us will be happy as a pig in shit, but Trump will face new challenges because of the change in fortune. So Trump will be in a sewer of shit. So he was born on June 14th, 1946 at 10:54 a.m. daylight saving time, wartime. 1946 was the year of the male fire dog. He was born on the female earth sheep day at the female earth snake hour in the summer of the male wooden horse month. So his zodiacal chart basically shows that, let's see, the upper row of the column that I have charted, his master day in Chinese astrology, shows me that female earth day represents his coming into this world. Dog and sheep are in the earth group. Horse, sheep, and snake have a strong relationship with fire elements. Fire is the mother element of earth. Wood that month, the earth, his day, these provide him with a master attraction relationship to the element of earth. His entire birth chart is full of earth and fire. Earth be extremely strong. He has a strong personality and determination. So his birth chart is an extremely strong special case. His lucky elements are earth and fire. Additional earth coming from synovial astrological cycles render him becoming a more powerful person in his life, which has led to our sorrow and misfortune at this point in human history. 2018 be the male earth dog year as it was. That was related to masculine earth, which is connected to the mountains. So Donald Trump stood on top of the world in 2018, but 2019 be the year of the female earth pig, and that's connected to flatland. So Trump will lose his altitude and his support. He'll face more challenges this year than he ever has in his life. So his landslide. So female earth, yin, of this year be the same element of Donald Trump's master day, his birthday, means Trump has many supporters standing by his side. The Russians, the international terrorist network of the National Rifle Association, the Republican Party, the entire white trash sewer shit of white pride worldwide. But the year of the pig is in the water element. Female earth, as the master of the day, can absorb water, absorb the flood, and water represents money to Trump. Water's not his lucky element. That means water brings him trouble in money management, business deals, economic policy, and trade negotiations. And water also represents the feminine. It represents the woman in Trump's life, or the woman he wishes were out of his life. This implies woman will give him a headache yet again. No heartache, because he has no heart to ache, but his head will. Now, you could take that as the head between his legs if you wish. The fortune of 2019 is ruled by the 10-year major cycle, yearly cycle, and monthly cycles. Trump's current major cycle is 2013 through 2022, the apex and culmination of his life arc. It falls under the cosmological category of the female metal elemental cow. So metal be related to Trump's behavior, reputation, and media speech. Female metal and male fire in the birth chart have an attractive relationship to water. Water be related to woman or spending money or new investments. And Trump has always exploited his image for a career and business. Cow is of the earth group. Earth helps Trump build up his wealth. Cow and snake in the birth chart have a fighting relationship. He often has conflict with people during this metal cow major cycle of his arc of human existence from 2013 through 2022, when his life effectively ends. So, because of this year being what it is, female earth being related to Trump's friends and supporters, female earth and male wood in the birth chart have an attractive relationship to earth. Male wood is related to career or pressures. Trump's friends help him to escalate the pressures or deal with lawsuits. The pig contains male wood and male water elements. The pig brings in pressures in career and money. Pig and snake in the birth chart have a conflict relationship because pigs eat snakes. Pigs are snake eaters, and they'll suck up a herptile right through their nostril and swallow it whole. So the big pig brings people to argue with Trump. And being in the water element, horse is the birth chart in the fire group. I was born in the year of the fire horse myself. Pig and horse can usually clash with each other, but horse contains female fire and female earth elements. The pig contains male water and male wood. The pig and the horse have hidden double attraction relationships. That implies disagreement and harmony be mixing in the Trump family and administration. Too many attractions and clashing relationships mixing together means these relationships will entangle him through the remainder of this arc of his life. That will be the functional part of his existence that will comprise any biographies ever writ about him in generations to come. So the zodiacal sign of the major cycle of, let's see, 1993, when all this got started with his involvement in Russia, through 2002, that's all Earth Pig Elemental 2. So this implies something similar happened during the 1993 through 1997 part of his life that will repeat in 2019. So if I review Donald Trump's past, it provides clues for me to predict his coming year. So the major cycle from 1983 through 1992 was the Earth Dog. Dog was in the Earth group. Dog is a strong Earth combination. He built his empire. Trump Tower opened in 1982. Trump Plaza at Atlantic City opened in 1982. Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino in May of 1984. Trump Shuttle was founded in 1989. The Taj Mahal opened in 1990. Closed in 1991 in a single year, the metal sheep influx. Trump Shuttle ceased operations in 1992, the water monkey influx. He divorced from Ivana that year. He filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the Taj Mahal Casino in 1991, and yet built the prestige image during the major cycle of the Earth Dog. 2018 was the year of the Earth Dog too, so his overall presidential job performance in the economy did well throughout 2018, riding entirely on all the initiatives were legislated into existence or administered into existence by his Democratic predecessor, the Black African-American Barack Hussein Obama. So he stood on the shoulders of a Black African giant, and I use the term African pointedly because, of course, Barack Obama was born in Kenya. And you take a look at that cycle of 1993 through 2002, the Earth Pig cycle, the major cycle from 2003 to 2012, the Metal Rat cycle. Both pig and rat are in the water group. Water is connected to Trump's money. Since water is his unlucky element, therefore, water is always has been, always will be debt or expense to Trump. It's also related to Trump's woman as the yin element. Wood is connected to Trump's career or lawsuits. Wood brings pressure on him, but he knows how to manage the pressures because he has strong fire elements protecting him. Trump married to Marla Maples in 1993, the water chicken combination. Chapter 11 bankruptcy was filed for Trump Plaza Hotel in 1994, the wooden dog combination. Trump Entertainment Resources were founded in 1995, the wooden pig combination. He negotiated divorce with Marla Maples in 1997 through 1999. It took a good 3 years. Had to file another Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino in 2004. He married the Euro-Slavonic model, the Slovenian lady, Melania Trump, in 2005. And his Trump Entertainment Resorts bankrupted and restructured in 2009. Metal, be the child element of Earth. We dig metals from the Earth. Metal is anything out of the Earth. Metal be related to Trump's outlook, speech, behavior, exposure in public. Metal also helps him increase popularity, relax, and enjoy his lifestyle. Monkeys and chickens are in the metal group. Monkeys and snakes of the hour column in his birth chart have an attractive relationship of water, bad for his money luck. The chickens and snakes of his hour column have a attraction to the relationship of metal, which is good for love relationships. So he's able to abuse a lot of women and get away with it. He considers himself lucky in love based on his predations. So he became a billionaire real estate mogul because his lucky element is Earth. And most of Trump's bankruptcies were related to casinos, because that's a water elemental business, because a casino is a night and cash flow business. So in 1991, the female metal sheep year, that was when the Trump Taj Mahal at Atlantic City was in debt for billions of dollars. Billions. Trump filed for bankruptcy in 1991. He had to sell off his yacht and his airlines for loan payments. He did surrender half his ownership interest in the Taj Mahal. That's female metal and male fire in the birth chart that have that water attractive relationship. In 1992, the year of the male water monkey, Trump owed $550 million United States dollars on the Trump Plaza Hotel. Trump declared bankruptcy again on the property in 1992. He filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on his Trump Plaza Hotel. He gave Citibank a 49% interest in the hotel. He stayed on as chief executive officer because of that bribe. Then by 2004, the year of the male wooden monkey, Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts filed for bankruptcy again that year after accruing about $1.8 billion United States dollars in debt. He reduced his share in the company to 25%. And by the year 2009, the year of the female earth cow, while the major cycle was the metal water rat, Trump Entertainment Resorts filed bankruptcy in 2009. He retained 10% ownership interest in the corporation. So he took advantage of the law and made good negotiations with the banks to the maximum of his own interest for each bankruptcy. He's the master, not of the deal. He's the master of the bankruptcy. He knows how to dig out gold from a ruined battlefield. He prides himself on being the master of the alchemical art of turning shit into gold by collapsing the economy around him and running off with whatever's not nailed down, whatever he can steal. To retain his public persona as the master of the deal based on massive failure is his most valuable asset. It's his only asset, his only talent. But 2019 is the year of the female earth pig, the first date of which was yesterday, the day before yesterday, actually. And there'd be multiple attraction and clash relationships among his birth chart, his 10-year major cycle, his yearly cycle, and his monthly cycle. And because of mingling relationships, current events will happen that will last, in terms of their impact, for months and years. So Trump's support base is all based on a concern for the economy. And because of the animals in his zodiac, the tiger and the pig in particular, which have a wood attraction relationship, the event that will occur is related to law or investigations. That'll keep him entirely wrapped up in his defenses. And because his tiger, horse, and dog animals have a fire relationship, he'll still maintain his strong supporting foundation, because his white trash insurgency will follow him into hell itself. They have wrapped their entire identity into this man's rise and fall. So the tiger and snake together have a bad interpersonal relationship. All arguments will continue. All personal confrontations. 1986 was a good example of a precursor to this. Major cycle was Earth Dog, but March was the month of the female fire rabbit. Female fire brings a good reputation from supporters, events related to reputation, media, or publishing. The rabbit was in the wood group. Rabbit and dog have a fire relationship. Rabbit and pig have wood relationships. And events basically continued throughout the months of that year. 1987 was when he published the book entitled The Art of the Deal. And then we have the year or month of the dragon, April, male Earth Dragon month in 1987. Dragon was in the Earth group. Dragon and dog had a fighting relationship. That was events concerning foreign policies, border issues. Dragon is a water dam. Events are related to money, economy, or trade. 1988 is when he bought the Plaza Hotel. And, of course, I could go on. The month of May was a female earth snake month. Snake is in the fire group. Pig was in the water group. Snake and pig have a hurtful relationship. Events related to good reputation, media, books, trade talk disagreements. That year in 1989, he bought airplanes for Trump's shuttle and appeared on Time magazine. Then in June, Male Metal Horse Month. Male metal is related to performance, media, reputation. Horses in the fire group, horse and pig, have a double attraction relationship of wood and earth. The support was stronger than the pressures in that year of 1990. That's when he opened the Trump Taj Mahal Casino and published his book entitled Surviving at the Top. And then July, you know, when I go through his chart, it's like going through just a history of various just dives, just collapses that he derives money from by running out with all the treasures that he can grab while the building burns around him. So basically, July is the month of the female metal sheep. Female metal and male fire have a water relationship. Events are related to money, economy, trade, or woman in Trump's life. The sheep and the cow have a conflicting relationship. The supporters had different opinions when in 1991, the Taj Mahal, which had opened in 1990, he filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy for it. By August, the male water monkey month of that year, 1992, you had elements of metal and water in the monkey. The monkey and the snake have a water relationship. It was a strong water month. The events were money, economy, trade, or woman. That's when he divorced from Ivana. Then by September, when you look at this from a zodiacal perspective, the month of the female water chicken that year, 1993, the chicken, cow, and snake have a strong metal relationship. It was a good at love relationship. Strong metal makes strong pig water. The money and the economy pressures increased. That's when he married Marla Maples. And then in October, the male wooden dog month that year, towards 1994, male wood, career pressure, investigation, or a law-related event. The dog was in the earth group. Male wood and female earth have an earth relationship, fighting back from one's career, economy, or monetary losses, looking for the best deal. That's when, in 1994, he declared bankruptcy for the Trump Plaza Hotel. Now, all of this, of course, some people might consider fascinating. Other people might consider all of this turgid. But it's all to make a point in the very near future. November, I'll only go through a few more of these. There's not much more I can stand. But nevertheless, it is fascinating. November was the female wood pig month. For the year 1995, pig is water. Female wood continues to bring some career pressure. The month being in that pig influence, under that influence of the pig, and the influence of the year of the pig, that year back in 1995, was when Trump doubled down on his bid for finance and economy issues. That's when he founded Entertainment Resorts. And then December, the next year, 1996, December was the month of the male fire rat. Rat's water element. Male fire and female metal have a water relationship. Trump supporters were worried about the economy. The rat and horse have a clashing relationship. Events related to money, economy, and woman are generally unfavorable to Trump. That's when he bought the Miss Universe organization. He was dating Miss Venezuela at the time, who I believe he helped win the Miss Universe. And you look at what's happened to Venezuela after that. Now, January 1997. January was the month of the female fire cow. Cows in the earth group. Female fire and cow bring back some support. Cow and sheep have a conflicting relationship, a sign of argument with people around him. January of 1997 was when he divorced with Maples and published his book entitled The Art of the Comeback. So the master day of Trump's birth chart, female Earth, flatlander ground. The ground won't get hurt when people can stomp on it. Female Earth has strong endurance and resistance. The first half of 2019 be dominated by wood and fire elements. Wood brings pressures on Trump. Fire will protect Trump while wood's attacking. He'll burn what's coming at him. The second half of 2019 is ruled by metal and water. Water brings the most trouble to Trump. So for 2019, what we have based on the Synoviet zodiacal forecast, sourcing from the very culture which Trump has declared trade war upon, he will experience 2019 as a year of trade war, economic incidents or influences, and impeachment. The year 2018, preceding this, the male Earth dog year, that was in the Earth group, which contained the male Earth elemental, male Earth connected to mountainous phenomena, manifestations. Earth was Trump's lucky element. He was in his luck period where he could ride on the shoulders of the black giant Barack Obama towards economic credit he never earned, received all based on strong Earth support yesteryear. But that mountain of 2018 collapses into the flatland of 2019. In the year of the pig, the year of the pig and shit, President Donald Trump will encounter more challenges than he could conceive of yesteryear in 2018. Now, the bad news for all of us is any bad news for President Donald Trump will likely bring bad news to the United States and world stock markets. From 1991 through 1994, Trump did not run his businesses well. He failed his investments during the water cycle. People doubted about his leadership. The watering of 2019, the watering down of Trump throughout this year, will be getting strong starting from August. He'll most certainly feel new challenges in trade wars, economics, and job markets. Americans focus on the money in their pockets. The possibility of presidential impeachment is hinged on Trump's ability to manifest accomplishments in economy throughout the second half of 2019, which, as we've seen, his methodology is scorch and burn. It's all slash and burn. Take down everything around you. Set the building on fire, burn it to the ground, and run off with the insurance money. Or run off with whatever you can steal. That's what he's going to do to the constitutional republic. He'll take us all down with him. He's going to destroy the American Republic this year. All of this in light of the United States and China announcing the next leg of trade talks, ahead of an increase in tariffs on Chinese goods scheduled for March 2nd. Chief Trade Negotiator Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin have headed to Beijing, or they're supposed to be headed to Beijing this week, if not next week, but very soon, to continue negotiations for a new trade deal. And in his State of the Union address, President Trump said any deal must include real structural change to end unfair trade practices. This is not going to end well. Now, I've closely watched, as has everyone else, with any sense of investment, the trade data that's been released. The Commerce Department's international trade data for November of last year, delayed by the government shutdown, is expected to show the trade deficit narrowing to 54 billion United States dollars, A slip in exports and rising imports pushed October's number to a 10-year high of 55.5 billion United States dollars. And that brings us to his glossing over any of that or skipping it entirely in his State of the Union speech, which was exhausted, ugly, and simply devoid of any ideas, inclusive only, most pronouncedly, of his dangerous scapegoating of immigrants. Now, in late December, yesteryear, the Earth dog year of 2018, when he was responding to pressure from anti-immigrant pundits, namely a cunt named Ann Coulter, as well as a tub of lard named Rush Limbaugh, President Trump, acting as if the media of Fox Channel ran the United States of America as an administration. When they said he needed to shut the government down, he obeyed them as if receiving orders from a superior. So the person running your country in many ways is Ann fucking Coulter. If you want to blame anyone for what happened, you can take Ann Coulter to court. Shut that cunt down before she kills us all. Because of her telling Trump to shut down the government on Fox News, President Trump responded by shutting the government down in an attempt to blackmail billions of dollars from Congress for a wall on our nation's southern border. And because of Ann Coulter and her demands from this cunt, for over a month, hundreds of thousands of federal employees went without paychecks, and many federal agencies stopped working or took increasingly desperate measures to keep the lights on. Trump's poll numbers slid. Members of his own party showed impatience. Late last month, after a failed primetime appeal for the wall from the Oval Office, Trump finally relented, signing a bill to reopen the government, but only until the day after Valentine's Day, February 15th. And he still wants his goddamn wall. And the government will shut down again if a long-term funding agreement cannot be reached. Yesterday night, during the State of the Union, a speech that in itself was delayed a week because of the shutdown, Trump made another primetime pitch. Now, to call Donald Trump's Tuesday night State of the Union address as chaotic, as I've heard people describe it, is giving it way too much credit. That term implies some sort of manic energy. And rambling doesn't capture the way in which the speech sandwiched a lot of general nastiness between two slices of generic calls for unity, by which Trump was clear that he meant everyone doing just as he wants. The best way to describe the speech is simply atrocious, listlessly delivered, horribly writ, and above all, free of any meaningful content or new ideas. Now, before I really begin disassembling it, I'm just taking a short look at what's going on in our community chat room. Everything looks like it's in order. So I thank everyone who's with us at this juncture of what's going to be the core of the struggle at hand, which will bring us all the way back to feminist issues that we were cut off from on my latest transition. Now, if a State of the Union speech is supposed to be where the White House declares its, shall we say, vision for the coming year and beyond, what Trump demonstrated most convincingly be that he's totally fucking blind. A speech from Barack Obama or Bill Clinton might be full of lofty goals. Even Stacey Abrams' brief response carried with it a sharply packaged list of possibilities. But Trump's speech was a hair's breadth from being absolutely empty. Trump did mention curing AIDS, the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and childhood cancer, and seemed to take a great deal of undeserved credit for progress that's been made in those areas. But those are so generally agreed on that endorsing them be like endorsing oxygen. Or at least they have been since Republicans had ever ceased referring to AIDS as gay cancer. Then it would be a universally agreed upon theme if we didn't have homophobic paradigms of ideological hatred indoctrinated throughout his base. Now, if the Republicans ever stopped referring to AIDS as gay cancer and declared instead that it's an affliction that must be treated as soon as possible with all immediacy, we would have some ground for this individual to stand on, or his party. But instead, the Republican Party has declared that AIDS was God's revenge on the lustful. Had they ever stopped being judgmental and started orientating themselves towards action, these presentations by Trump on how much credit he should get in advancements in these fields might be at least validated by circumstance. But the Republicans have never ceased referencing AIDS as gay cancer and declaring that it was God's revenge on the lustful. And resultantly, Trump's grabbing credit from the medical industrial complex is beyond offensive. Here we have an individual like Donald Trump taking up the mantle of eradicating AIDS in the United States, a laudable goal that'd be far from impossible, but would require an upheaval of his own policies and rhetoric as president. Putting an end to the AIDS epidemic would be elusive without outreach to racial minorities and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer peoples who be most at risk of contracting the HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus. But these peoples disproportionately lack health insurance, a problem that Donald Trump himself has exacerbated as president. And they be skeptical of Donald Trump, in the wake of his ban on transgender military service. So it's like a slave master on a plantation talking about the great work he's done for emancipation after he loses the Civil War. So Trump's speech opened by referencing, as our executive producer brought to the fore, the achievements of forces fighting in World War II and the accomplishments of those who landed on the moon. But despite these lofty touchstones, both based entirely on state-propagated mass delusions, Trump provided no goals to match. In fact, for all his callbacks to America's efforts in the European theater of war, they only mention the subcontinental superpeninsula of Northeast Asia we call Europe today, what we once called Christendom, earned as center of his speech. The only attention Europe got in his speech was slaps for being freeholders on drug pricing and for not paying their fair share on defense. And the best Trump could muster on space was to refer to the upcoming resumption of manned launches from the Kennedy Space Center, a program in place since well before Trump took office. So we have a situation based on fantasy. It is the mass psychotic fantasy that Americans won World War II. Within that fantasy narrative, as our executive producer, Mr. Pravara, pointed out, Trump could say anything. And then to speak about men's landing on the moon, of course without acknowledging the fact the Japanese landed there first, to establish a garden on the moon for the Reichskolony to follow in a suicide mission in which a man gladly gave his life not just for the emperor, but for all humanity. If one small step of an American is something big for mankind, how large be the fact that a Japanese cosmonaut, as the Russians would call them, a taikonaut, as the Japanese, or Chinese actually would call them, how much more so that one of these great individuals planted a garden for future generations that, of course, was subsumed within the territory of the Reichskolonien, or the Reichskolony on the moon itself. And how is that not even a next step in all human evolution? By the way, the Nipponjin, or Japanese people's term for astronaut, be Uchu Hikoshi, celestial aviator, celestial aviator. So the Nihongo, or Japanese language term, combines Uchu, or celestes, the heavens, with Hiko, or aviator, and Shi, which is the ideogram for samurai, or gentleman, combinative as Uchu Hikoshi, or celestial aviator, it is a universal pilot, or astronautical conqueror. The Germans simply refer to their astronaut corps as Raumänner, or spacemen. With the French, they use the term spationauts. So all of this, of course, the fact that other cultures even have astronaut programs, is totally lost on either Russians or Americans, who think they were the only motherfucking populations ever to enter hard vacuum. All based on the emptiness of a propaganda machine and a systematic chain of lies. Now, when it comes to Donald Trump's speech of disunion, after opening with flat, dishwatery talk of unity, delivered with the enthusiasm of a fourth grader delivering a report on a book he did not read, Trump gained a slight bit of energy when it came to what was by far the largest part of the speech, Trump bragging on Trump. In a pattern far more akin to a rally than a speech, Trump delivered a line, waited for the applause, delivered another, and waited again. Trump's surrogates are fond of telling how he can stand up night after night and make speeches greater than an hour. But that seems a mean feat when it consists of nothing but tossing out a few words and making adore me hand signs. Most of Trump's speech was a Trump speech. Other than demands for praise, the center of Trump's speech was filled with nastiness. There were the exaggerated claims of immigrant violence, absolute lies about the origin and nature of MS-13, and deliberate conflating of the southern border and drugs. There was also some space devoted to building ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement pukes, into action heroes, a section that notably did not include stories of its agents arresting parents at children's school bus stops or prying families apart as hospitals, or the fact that we just buried during the weekend, this weekend or last, that young lady who died in ICE custody at the age of, 9? We put her in the ground, her dying in their custody under their abuses. So Trump can dress up his demand for a wall all he wants. Yesterday, he also spoke of a smart, strategic, see-through steel barrier, a new invisible steel, he seemed to be alluded to, and about a common-sense proposal. But Trump's border wall wasn't born as a common-sense proposal. It was campaign rally red meat. It was imagined as a monument to anti-immigration sentiment, telling people outside the United States to stay out. Trump's shutdown was fomented not by any crises on the actual border, but by a political crisis involving Trump's own base, which had taken Trump at his word about the wall and what it would be. No amount of fear-mongering should distract from that. During the past 2 years, Trump has learned to modulate his anti-immigration rhetoric in official settings, to dress it up in the bureaucratic language of federal policy. But yesterday he offered unfiltered immigrant scapegoating, laying practically all the sins of this republic at immigrants' feet. Trump declared working-class Americans are left to pay the price for mass illegal immigration. Reduced jobs, lower wages, overburdened schools and hospitals, increased crime, and a depleted social safety net. Now, insecure jobs, stagnant wages, underfunded schools and safety net programs, a globally embarrassing healthcare system, crime rates, immigrants, undocumented or otherwise, are responsible for none of these problems. But here was the President of the United States telling those people willing to hear it that they were. He didn't claim just that Democrats were for open borders, but that they were cowards, shivering behind walls and guards, while leaving ordinary people to face the flood of criminals coming across the border. Trump said, year after year, countless Americans are murdered by criminal illegal aliens. This is flatly untrue. There be no undocumented immigrant murder wave. Study after study does not support that claim. At one point, Trump diverted from his usual talking points on the subject, indicating that he's open to accepting more high-skilled legal immigrants. If it wasn't a spontaneous wink of Trumpian hyperbole, it could be a promising sign of a pivot in the immigration debate. Then Trump had to ruin it all by making a ploy to lambast late-term abortions in response to recent bills in New York and Virginia that would expand women's options for ending their pregnancies in the third trimester. The Virginia legislation ultimately failed, and Trump's invocation of it during the State of the Union looked to be an attempt to shore up support among his anti-abortion base. The partisan brawl over the two pieces of legislation could presage more fights over abortion rights as the Supreme Court's lurch to the right under Kavanaugh appointment and leadership puts the future of abortion on unsteady footing, perhaps to be rendered illegal completely. But Trump didn't call Democrats just baby killers for supporting a woman's right to choose. He called them gleeful baby killers, ready to execute a child already born. And when it came to investigations, that was where Trump delivered the most impactful line of the night. In the midst of his deliver a sentence, wait for applause litany, Trump declared that unless investigations end, he will not cooperate on the operation of your government. To quote his T verbatim, an economic miracle is taking place in the United States, and the only thing that can stop it are foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations. Now, to be clear in getting his point across, he repeated it. If there is going to be peace and legislation, there cannot be war and investigation. Several observers, aside myself, have noted the similarity to Richard Nixon calling for an end to investigations in his 1974 State of the Union address, but there be a critical difference no one else aside myself has noted. By making a dichotomy between investigations and legislation, Trump is doing what even Richard Nixon dared not do: turn the request that investigations end into a threat. You stop investigating me or I shut your government down for the next 2 years I'm in office. Toward the end of the speech, Trump looped around to make his big surprise reveal that a Holocaust survivor on hand was one of those rescued in part by one of the soldiers on hand. So he dug these two living fossils up to parade them around so he could reinforce the myth of World War II. And above and beyond that, the myth that the Americans were liberators in World War II. A heartwarming fairy tale, but Trump treated this twist as if it somehow vindicated all the points of his speech. It didn't. It had naught to do with anything about it. But then the same could be said of much of the speech itself, which was so chopped together from disconnected parts that a single sentence that began with abortion ended up wandering past a call to faith before bumbling into NATO funding, all in the same sentence. And if Trump's opening slice of unity was hollow, the closing bit was absolutely airless, mixing words evocative of "this land is your land" with snippets of old speeches, because being a white supremacist has apparently robbed Stephen Miller of the ability to craft anything new. And that was Trump's speech. Not a single stirring metaphor, not a sentence that landed with anything like a touch of grace, not a single idea that wasn't somewhere on the ugly side of trite. But then we get to the culture war and how the woman of the house flipped the State of the Union script in a manner I'm very ambivalent about and do not agree with. The joyful defiance of the Congresswoman in white at the State of the Union. It was the most unexpected moment of an otherwise dully divisive evening. A group of lawmakers taking a speech that wasn't about them and insisting that, in fact, it was. The Congresswoman wore white. So here at President Trump's Second State of the Union address, a triangular trash of the House of Representatives stood out in the familiar sea of suits, as if lit by a spotlight, the female members of the 116th Congress, dressed in cream, eggshell, and alabaster, the traditional shades of the suffragette movement. Shown from above, they looked like a slice of a wedding cake on a dark tablecloth. When the camera came in low to pan across their faces, they looked like a choir between numbers, murmuring a remark to a neighbor, raising an eyebrow. Their conductor, Nancy Pelosi, shuffled papers from her station behind the president in a pantsuit the color of fresh ream bound for the printer. Before the presidential pageantry began, the Congresswoman posed on a spiral staircase in 2 long rows, as if ready to descend, Busby Berkeley style, into the chamber below. You can't compose an image like that if you don't have the numbers for it. 103 women are serving in the House of Representatives, which makes the 116th Congress the most female in history, as well as the most diverse. Seated in front of the president, they looked like a battalion. Purposeful, united, prepared to fight together against their diabolic adversary in the skewed red tie behind the podium. Now, symbolic dressing has become a trend in the past couple of years, at award shows as well as at political ones. Spectacles, like we saw last night. Yesteryear, Congresswoman wore black to the State of the Union, as Hollywood actresses did in the same month to the Golden Globes to show support for the #MeToo movement. But the last time white clothes got as much political attention as they did on yesterday night was on Election Day in the year before yesteryear, 2016. When women wore white to the polls to cast their vote for Hillary Clinton, who had embraced suffragette white on the campaign trail and had worn a symbolic white suit to her second debate against Trump. She wore one to his inauguration, too. Social media that day was filled with selfies taken by voters in white dresses, t-shirts, and jackets, elated, as we all were in the belief we were electing our nation's first female president. As the results came in, skewed by Russian hacking, and the optimism melted away as we realized we'd been invaded via a battlefront no one had ever fought on before, cyberspace, where the enemy came in through our voting booth and occupied our government, all our optimism melted away, and that hopeful white came to seem absurd, naive, even obscene. As a San Franciscan, myself, participating in various events where cross-dressing be not the norm, I know I myself am not the only person who found it difficult to look at the dopey white dress hanging in my closet, still bearing its wrinkled "I voted" sticker. But progress has been made in these past few years of Russian occupation, and the white worn by the Congresswoman at the State of the Union seemed celebratory as well as defiant. The woman's choice of white as the outfit of unity was its own kind of reclamation. Suffragette white, after all, has an extremely fraught and controversial history, in large part because suffrage itself has an extremely fraught and controversial history. It wasn't woman, the collective, who got in practice so that they could get practical results concerning the vote in the America of the 1920s, as Trump himself would later claim. It was merely white women who in practice got the vote in the America of 1920. The suffragist agenda, in a decision whose errors would reverberate into a feminist movement that would go on to preach justice but too often fail to practice it, deliberately excluded women of color. But reclamation, as a political weapon, but also as a broader ethic, allows a new kind of history to be made. The white worn yesterday, a uniform chosen for the occasion by Representative Louis Frankel of Florida, obviously Jewish American, the chair of the Democratic Women's Working Group, that white echoed the all-white outfits Democratic woman wore to Trump's first State of the Union in 2017, and the black they wore in 2018 as a visual nod to the hashtag #MeToo and the hashtag Time's Up movements. The lawmakers who donned white yesterday found ways both to acknowledge the shamefulness of history and to repurpose it. But to redefine it, they made clear on their own terms that they were going to do just that. Commit to reclamation and redefinition of the meaning of color association. As Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts tweeted on yesterday evening, the women of the 116th were asked to wear white tonight in tribute to the suffragettes tonight. I honor women like Alice Paul, who led the movement, and women like Ida B., who were excluded from it. Kente cloth and the color white, the African woven cloth in white coloration, holding space for both womanists and feminists always. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, acknowledging the fact that Shirley Chisholm, as well as Geraldine Ferraro and Hillary Clinton, wore white in ceremonial settings as a nod to suffrage. She put it like this: I wore all white today to honor the woman who paved the path before me and for all the women yet to come. From suffragettes to Shirley Chisholm, I wouldn't be here if it were not for the mothers of the movement. Thusly, a broad coalition that makes space for individualized nuance. That complicated idea, it turned out, was part of the easy imagecraft of the evening. Nancy Pelosi, perched behind the president and an American flag, and fresh off a political victory over Trump, in which he was humiliated over the Trump shutdown, as she refused to bend to his demands for a border wall. She presided over the scene, herself clad in an all-white uniform, ensuring its visual harmony. The House Speaker gave her caucus a slight nod when the president delivered a line they might applaud. She scowled when Trump lied and spun and preached division.
As he concluded his speech, she offered him a rousingly petty and therefore exceedingly internet-friendly round of applause. She's powerful enough to have become flattened into a meme. At times yesterday, Pelosi resembled a conductor of a human orchestra, aware of the emotions of the audience and attuned to the rhythms of the score, using sweeps of her hands to convey to her musicians when, precisely, the crescendo should swell. She too had some repurposing to do, and her own approach to that work helped foment the other striking moment of an otherwise utterly unstriking speech. A scene that came just a few lines after Trump found himself pleasantly surprised by applause from the Democratic side of the aisle. He said teasingly, even flirtatiously, to the woman who had just risen at his words, "Don't sit, you're going to like this." And he paused dramatically, and then the Russian puppet president said, "Exactly 1 century after Congress passed the constitutional amendment giving women the right to vote, we also have more women serving in the Congress than at any time before." Well, this year, I'll have you know, marks a century since the 19th Amendment granting American women the right to vote, as was passed by the Congress. Some of the Congresswomen accessorized their outfits with vintage ERA, or Equal Rights Amendment, pins from the 1970s. That amendment may have failed, but it'd be heartening to see that this fighting spirit, its own, and its funky font, live on. Even Tiffany Trump showed up in a belted white dress, though whether this constituted a message of defiance or merely an innocent fashion choice be impossible to say. Melania and Ivanka Trump avoided misinterpretation by wearing black. In 2016, the year before yesteryear, Clinton's embrace of suffragette white raised questions about the exclusion and prejudice that have marred this republic's women's movement since Seneca Falls. Given the racism displayed by so many suffragettes, it was wondered what modern progressive woman truly embraced the color. But I turned to Ayanna Pressley, that congresswoman from Massachusetts, who wore her white coat, carried that kente cloth clutch, and her elegant response that she wrote on Twitter, "Tonight I honor a woman like Alice Paul, who led the movement, and women like Ida B, who were excluded from it." Now, all of this really converged in terms of redefinition when these women of all races and all nationalities, now Americans and Democrats, when all these Democratic female members of Congress cheered after President Donald Trump said there are more women in Congress than ever before serving during his second State of the Union address. And his response, perhaps playfully, was, "You weren't supposed to do that." Not far into his speech, here you have Donald Trump, midway through his State of the Union speech yesterday evening, doing something that's rare for a narcissist of his level of psychosis, applying his habit of rhetorical excess to someone other than himself, beginning all too ironically to salute the recent gains made by American women, saying, "No one has benefited more from our thriving economy than women, who have filled 58% of the newly created jobs in the last year." He had apparently not even been expecting the line, the statistic bolstering the broader point about the thriving economy, to be met with any applause. And when the Democratic woman of the House of Representatives, all clad in white, the symbolic shade of women's suffrage, applauded it anyway as a show of political unity, then he sputtered. And then, even though they weren't supposed to, even though he admonished them and said, "Oh, you weren't supposed to do that," You're not towing your party line. He had to insinuate even then the divisions of himself and his blood enemy, the female race, the female species. They took it upon themselves to do something else. They rose to their feet. First a few of them, then several, and finally all of them. An eddy of brightness within a sea of evil dark suits. The woman cheering, clapping, laughing, and pointing to themselves as job fillers, reveling in the irony that their presence in the congressional chamber was one thing a boast-prone president really could claim credit for. Many of the women, indeed, had ended up in their new jobs precisely as a reaction to the presidency and policies of Russian puppet Donald Trump. It was that most unexpected of moments in a State of the Union event that was otherwise so dully divisive. It was unscripted. It was human. It was fun. A term I rarely use. The rote inertias of party politics colliding with the brief delights of simply a party in the celebratory sense. But the scene that erupted in the House chamber yesterday night was also a moment of reclamation. So here was that line in that speech that, like most of the president's lines, was meant to be about himself. And here was a group of women, many of them newly elected to Congress, and many of them women of color, insisting that it was, in fact, about them. About they and not he. There be politics as performance, and there be politics as an intimate and urgent force in people's lives. The State of the Union, a spectacle. That be also a setting for declarations of presidential policy, summons both. The speech oft hosts a series of uncomfortable collisions between empowerment and exploitation, between people highlighted as fellow citizens and people used as props. The Democratic women of the House, their outfits all but demanding attention and comment, effectively weaponized those tensions. Knowing the power of the image, understanding the capabilities of the strategic spectacle, they effectively objectified themselves. But they didn't exploit themselves. In their uniforms instead, they were insistently joyful and insistently vocal, and perhaps above all, insistently there. In the face of the enemy. Within an event designed to center itself on the chief executive, they effectively reclaimed their time. And the president said, after the woman first stood to be counted, perhaps attempting to restore the evening's promised Trumpocentrism, he said, "Thank you very much. Thank you very much," like an Elvis impersonator. Then he said, "No one has benefited more from our thriving economy than women, who have filled 58% of the new jobs created in the last year." And I saw, in the close-ups on facial expressions, the congresswoman in white looking at one another dubiously. Was this even true? They couldn't even believe he was reading this from his script, and that's when they started to stand up. And Trump was right to an extent. The woman did like it, his line, and that line may have been historically inaccurate. It may have been delivered by a president who has been both accused of and known to brag about sexual assault, a serial rapist, a president who has referred to women as horses and pigs and dogs in the non-zodiacal sense, but rather as the most abusive of metaphors. But in that moment, the woman of the 116th Congress chose to focus on the message rather than the messenger. And they rose again, cheering and applauding, not the president, but themselves. And then they took the celebration further. They started chanting, "USA, USA, USA," they yelled, the sentiment spreading through the congressional chamber, thunderous and insistent, and against all odds, jubilant. And so, for a moment, that most basic cheer, which Donald Trump and his supporters had for so long co-opted as their own, stolen like everything else, was co-opted once again. The chant, one that, in political settings, has so often suggested swaggering jingoism and cowboy diplomacy, and the polite fiction that politics be effectively indistinguishable from sporting events, took on a new kind of symbolism. Yesterday night, USA, USA, USA echoed throughout the House as a cheer of progress and possibility. Its syllables centered on women who were clad in history but looking to the future. Whilst the president delivered his prepared remarks, the lawmakers engaged in an ad-lib that doubled as the most fundamental of American activities, being told you weren't supposed to do that and doing it anyway. Even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got to her feet. They were going to take Trump's statement as a compliment. Some of them shimmied and pumped their fists in the air. Trump risked his ad-lib jokes, saying, you weren't supposed to do that, before going on, more women are in the workplace than ever, and we also have more women serving in Congress than at any time before. And then Nancy Pelosi, stirring to life, stood and extended her hands to the black and white, as if to say, screw the DJ, but he's playing our song. And the Congresswoman again leapt to their feet. A robust, surprising USA starting up in their honor. Maybe it was a case of positive cultural appropriation or subversion. That macho cheer given some new meaning. Anyway, for once, Trump had spoken the truth, and he did seem to enjoy it when the people clapped. And yet, despite all that I'm articulating in the positive, I am antithetical to their giving him anything because of the reality of his desire to destroy them. Because now I have to explain, in light of all I've just presented, why Donald John Trump erased protections from the legal definitions of domestic violence, sexual assault, all based on direct orders from motherfucking Russia under the cock of the misogynist lunatic Vladimir Putin. The old Soviet regime was atheistic by force, but since the rise of Putin, his power has come from pandering to the Russian Orthodox Church. Since excommunicated from the Byzantine Orthodox Church of the Eastern Rites liturgy, as centered on our Oriental version of the Vatican State, the city of Constantinople within Istanbul, where the Patriarchate has condemned the followers of the Russian Orthodox Church to burn in hell eternal as souls lost and damned, because the Russian Orthodox Church now follows the Rasputin of Vladimir Putin. Alexander Dugin, the co-religionist of Michael Aquino, introduced proudly by Alex Jones as Putin's brain. That same Russian Orthodox Church excommunicated with all its followers to damnation because it accepts corporal punishment in the home and school, among oh so many other heresies. This legal step backward into the past be but pandering to the base in Russia, their version of a white trash sewer of shit, which be far more likely to see the neo-Soviet Vladimir Putinista regime's actions against human and most specifically female or child rights as righteous in and of themselves rather primitive and wrong. In 2011, the year my late and sainted Cyrus died, Diana Zujin-Lin herself, Takabayashi Hideko, born as such in the city of Tokyo, capital of the Empire of Japan, in 1923, the very year of the Equal Rights Amendment, in terms of its inception, in terms of the greatest triumphs of the suffragette movement, born during the great earthquake and fire in Tokyo, delivered from the womb and laying her eyes on a world ablaze. That lady, my mother, died in 2011, the same year Putin's run for return to the presidency took place, when thousands of people protested and maligned Putin openly on the streets, where thereupon his goons stuffed ballot boxes and roughed up the protesters, killing scores of them, and bringing him into office on a false vote just as they brought their puppet Trump. But it wasn't until U.S. Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Rodham Clinton, remarked that his elections were unfair based upon all watchdog agency reports, that Vladimir Putin chose an object of scorn and scapegoating, the female species. He had frequently remarked on how offended he was that this woman, referring to Hillary Rodham Clinton, this woman dare have opinions. Dare she have opinions. This woman. And he openly started saying that Hillary Rodham Clinton was directly responsible for stirring up dissent in his conquest of the Russian peoples. That's when we began to see the tactical misogyny that would manifest most malevolently in his invasion of the Ukraine. When he invaded the sovereign nation state of the Ukraine, a nation with a population and geographic size equal to that of France, then Kremlin-backed television degraded Ukrainian women as part of Putin's wider culture wars. Despite Russia's notorious arsenal of media propaganda against Ukraine, one tactic has gone practically unnoticed: the rampant deployment of misogynistic rhetoric. This discourse aimed to discredit the people behind Ukraine's Euromaidan uprising, to cast doubt on the ongoing situation in Ukraine as one caused by emotionally unstable bitches, and to further underline Russian President Vladimir Putin's image as a protector of traditional values, which help keep bitches subservient, help keep bitches on a leash, help keep bitches where they belong, in the doghouse. The primetime televisual program, entitled The Furies of Maidan, Sex, Psychosis, and Politics, be a particularly shameless example. That mini-series, supposedly documentarian in nature, depicted a Ukraine that regressed into a nearly literal inferno of gyrating women, of female bodies on the loose, a sexist, distasteful, at times so outrageous that it's almost humorous, televisual expose from NTV, one of Russia's largest Kremlin-backed channels. In the Cyrillica, the Slavonic alphabet, it would be HTB, a Russian free-to-air televisual channel that was launched as a subsidiary of Vladimir Gusinsky's company, MediaMost. Their documentary is exemplary of the attitude that Putin and his cronies have toward women. The program, which first aired in April of 2014, opened with a promo segment in which a voiceover announces, "They like it rough. The bitches like it rough. And they be aroused by fear. The cunts get wet with fear. Fear's what makes a pussy drip." Amid scenes of Euromaiden gatherings and clashes, we see some of the women who will subsequently be insulted, interlaced with images of purportedly rough sex, and a psychiatrist analyzing women's extremism. In the 30 minutes that follow, the show's producers attempt to discredit female leaders, female activists, and female politicians involved in Ukraine's Euromaidan. The protests launched in November of 2013 for closer integration with the European Union that led to the ouster of the Russian puppet president of Ukraine, President Viktor Yanukovych, and his government in February that year by presenting caricatures in terms of deconstructing those women who ousted Viktor Yanukovych, presenting caricatures of these liberators of their own nation, saying they're sexually depraved, psychologically unstable furies from the ancient Greek mythology of the female harpies, the sky warriors, half eagle, half female, half human torso, half the claws of the vulturess that descended on sailors to pluck them from their ships and devour them alive. Their feminist revolution was portrayed as an outlet for their apparent repressed sexual drive for abuse and unhealthy aggression in an attempt to provoke such abuses that men must always give women preemptively so that they never go wild as a group like they did in Ukraine. So this mockery of a documentary entitled Furies runs the gamut of sexist accusations, sex used for professional advancement, a cunt will spread her leg to get ahead, inappropriate outfit choices by male observation, she's not showing enough ass, hysterical facial expressions, eyes, and laughter, all of which men masturbate over in pornographic magazines, how a female's face becomes so distorted by orgasm. This is the kind of effect they promoted by catching women in a celebratory mood over the liberation of their nation. The narrator even suggests that journalist and activist Tetyana Chernoval's much covered, brutal mass rape and attack in public by Russian insurgents was in fact self-inflicted mutilation to gain attention. Of course, journalists and politicians are prime targets. NTV's list of furies includes a Ukrainian anti-corruption journalist, 2 Ukrainian parliamentarians, and a female doctor who ran the Euromaidan medical treatment fee. It even reaches Victoria Nuland, the United States Assistant Secretary of State, and Dalia Grybauskaitė, Lithuania's president, a woman, 2 outspoken supporters of Euromaidan. The program brands the last 2 with one of the worst slanders possible in the eyes of motherfucking Russian NTV. Western lesbians. So, Putin's deliberate misogyny as an operational target, this kind of tactical approach to destroying the enemy by declaring their females to be the field of battle, target all the women, and you destroy the future for the families. It's not clear how many people worldwide watched Furies back in 2014, but in motherfucking Russia, Gazprom Media estimated its channel's viewership at 130 million. Pretty much the entire population of motherfucking Russia, everyone saw it. Because their population is equal to that of the Empire of Japan. 130 million. So that means everyone in Russia saw this. After the video was uploaded to NTV's website on April 19th of 2014, it continued to pick up thousands of views per day, reaching more than 64,000 plays in its first month. Now, since then, the hits must be up to millions. The video also received tens of thousands of hits the very day it was aired on YouTube. It's significant that NTV airs not only in Russia and is watched by Russian speakers in many former Soviet nations, as well as in the United States, Germany, and Israel, which received this mockery of a documentary as if it were gospel truth. Because no one's more misogynist than Jewish culture. The only ethnicity on the surface world whose men live longer than their women. Every other culture, ethnicity, nationality on earth, from indigenous tribes to developed industrial civilizations, the biological norm is the female lives longer than the man. Only the Jews have reversed that equation, where the woman is so stressed taking care of their neurotic, psychotic husband, the Jewess dies first. And since Russia's annexation of Crimea and the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 over eastern Ukraine, that year of 2014 when Putin's image abroad was sharply fallen, at home, his anti-Ukrainian propaganda machine resulted in a 20% jump in his approval ratings. Since the beginning of that year, reaching a high of over 80%. Because one thing all Russian men agree on, it doesn't matter that only Putin has all the money. It doesn't matter that only the oligarchs have all the power. What matters is he's granted us all the right to kill our wives and daughters and sisters and girlfriends and not be prosecuted, which I outlined in my latest translation and will have to return to as a subject again tonight. With one exception, the Western media never paid attention to Furies of Maidan. This is both surprising because it's perfect clickbait and an all too alarming indication of the lack of understanding outside Russia and Eastern Europe of how sexism goes hand in hand with the rise in homophobia and nationalism in motherfucking Russia. When used as a tool of mass media, this overt and deliberate misogyny has a significant social impact. It signals that the government be actively defining gender roles and dictating what be an ideal woman by Putinista definition. To imply that politically active and outspoken women be less feminine and mentally unstable, be a linkage that be dangerous to spread, especially in a social context that does not off question many other gender stereotypes. By demonizing the woman involved in Euromaidan and relying on tired stereotypes, this mockery of a documentary undermines not just Ukraine's recent revolution, but also female politicians and activists everywhere. In one scene, an elderly male professor of psychiatry informs the viewer that women who self-actualize through politics are no longer women in bed and will discard their husband. And the solution, at least initially, back to the kitchen. Get the bitch in the kitchen. After decades of Soviet state policy of gender equality that in effect promoted a double standard for women, as on the surface liberated in the workplace yet responsible for maintaining the household and caring for children, Russian society remains deeply patriarchal. Although women have mostly equal access to education and jobs in major cities, strict division between traditional male and female gender roles dominate popular culture and mass media. Advertisements and television programming present women as either hypersexualized or traditionally feminine and subservient keepers of the hearth. Differences between men and women are often explained as essential and natural, and grave national crises with domestic violence and sexual harassment be overwhelmingly not addressed by the government and rarely addressed in public dialogue. In 2013, the last time I checked, women made up only 13% of Russia's parliamentarians. In this context, telling Russia's women that it not be ladylike to protest or seek political office further confines them and attempts to discourage more than half the nation's population from participating in anti-Putin demonstrations or running for political office in opposition to Putin's cronies. Misogyny has, in short, become a weaponized state tool of oppression to promote the Putin administration as well as anti-European Union sentiment in eastern Ukraine. This tactic becomes even more evident when the highest-ranking male politicians in both Russia and Russo-collaborationist Ukraine, the separatists, make painfully sexist statements in their official capacity as leaders. Yanukovych once stated his political opponent, Yulia Tymoshenko, a former prime minister, to go back to the kitchen. He evidently decided that prison was a more suitable destination, had her arrested and locked up, where I never found out her fate. In 2012, before Putin granted amnesty to the imprisoned members of Pussy Riot, a rock band, an all-female girl go-go band, if you will, he intoned, if they had not broken the law, they would now be at home doing the housework, where every bitch belongs. This message wasn't confined to television. A day before the premiere of Furies, Russia's controversial member of parliament, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, once the terror of what Russia could become, personally attacked a pregnant journalist during a press conference, proclaiming her a victim of the uterine frenzy attributed to Euromaidan, before instructing his subordinates to violently gang rape her to death. Once Putin's main Ukrainian ally was lost to power, the Kremlin and its supporters took matters into their own hands. Along with Putin's homophobia and reactionary nationalism, misogyny be just as toxic a mechanism to which Kremlin-backed actors have ever increasingly resorted. Putin's stated strategic imperative imagines a world without women in politics, devoid of what he sees as the weaker sex, ergo. Therefore, the message behind the outrageous statements popularized via Furies be part of a larger strategy to cater to a socially reactionary demographic in white pride populations worldwide. But Putin's most immediate operational ideal be one in which weak and sexually deviant women do never again interfere with his imperialistic ambitions to conquer all planet Earth and remake it in his own Antichrist image. Now, a good night to Ramona Halitha Henry, who will be taking leave of us for this evening. Some messages from our brother in battle, Daniel Arola, who reminds myself that Pussy Riot references themselves as a punk band. Thank you, sir. I've never been very tonally inclined. I'm fairly atonal and amusical. So I certainly appreciate that correction. And he does observe that any man who states that a woman's place be in the kitchen obviously doesn't know how to please them in the bedroom. Well, fuck, most of these guys, all they want are the sandwiches, right? Bitch, make me a sandwich. Oh, wait a second. That's what the say to their bottom boys in prison or something like that. At any rate, my own observation politics over the last decade has provided myself a completely new and deeper understanding of what misogyny be and how it must be used by all right-wing authoritarian types in any society they infest, like roaches. I am of the deeply held impression myself that what swept the Republican Party into takeover of the House of Representatives in 2010 was not the emergence of the Tea Party as much as it was manipulation in political ads to vilify the first ever woman Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Everywhere that year were ads which gratuitously used the name Nancy Pelosi and painted a narrative that male Democratic incumbents couldn't even lift a pen on their own without the aid of Nancy Pelosi. One ad I remember said, Nancy Pelosi is the mom who has to hold her Democratic son's cock when he pees. Otherwise, he'll miss the target. The Tea Party came after that. It was a piss party, a fabrication paid for by the Koch brothers to get an angry extremist faction into Congress, which served two purposes. One was to push the right to be more radicalized and heartless than it ever was before. And the other was to create someone for the establishment to blame, as if moving harder to the right was not their conspiracy in the first place. In any event, they took over the House in 2010, and it's been all downhill ever since, till midterms of yesteryear, and until last night's spontaneous display of femininity. Hillary Rodham Clinton was the second major experimentation in female leadership that we liberal progressives attempted. And look at what such wrought. Vladimir Putin, with his bitch boy Donald Trump, getting back at her for the hatred he convinced himself was justified for her. In either case of Trump or Putin. I can't even differentiate the two now. They're siamized at the hip. They share each other's pantyhose. You can't look at societies or factions dominated by males with simple logic and rationale. They respond only to mob and invective. The invective of the reptilian brain, the reptilian cortex at the base of our brain that operates at the primal level of fuck or be fucked. Fuck her over before she fucks you. Fuck 'em down. And how easy all the fuckers fell into chanting, lock her up. Now we should be locking them up. But the Republican Party made General Mike Flynn, the man who flew over to Russia to speak as an American consultant on their media. He's been converted, now that he's undergoing final judgment, into a Brigitte Ann Kelly. And we can all forget about putting that big mouth lard ass in jail. But more than words, Vladimir Putin's misogyny has far-reaching consequences. And the Russian president has a history of making demeaning remarks about women. Per Putin, I don't have bad days because I'm not a woman. That quote be from an actual interview with American director Oliver Stone. Now, it must be remembered, I myself was interviewed by his son, Sean Stone. So when Sean Stone was affiliated with Buzzsaw, Douglas Dietrich had his interview with Sean Stone. And Douglas Dietrich spoke of child trafficking at the Presidio military base and Michael Aquino. Then Sean Stone went on Alex Jones and said Michael Aquino's a pedophile and a child molester, per Douglas Dietrich, misquoting myself with all lack of any sense of legal sophistication or adult maturity. Now, Alex Jones can't touch Douglas Dietrich. Alex Jones fears Douglas Dietrich more than he fears Satan. So Alex Jones took it out on Sean Stone. He ran crying to Aquino, his cult leader, because Alex Jones is a Satanist of the Temple of Set, which is how he met Alexander Dugin, through their rituals that they conduct with Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, who sleeps with Alex Jones in hotel rooms all over the United States. And when it came to Michael Aquino being roused out of slumber by Alex Jones, crying to his daddy, Michael Aquino approached Oliver Stone and said, "Your boy says I'm a child molester, a chomo. If you don't surrender to me, your entire fucking world, you're gonna lose everything you got." And so Oliver Stone said, "What do you want?" And Michael Aquino said, "I want you to go to Russia and promote Vladimir Putin. He's my man. I want you to make him a hero of the United States. I want you to take a human piece of shit, this so-called whistleblower, who's one of my mind control victims, and make him a hero. I want you to take this boy and, oh my God, let me try and remember, what was the name of the whistleblower who ultimately fled to Moscow? That was, oh my God. Can anybody help me here? Now, I've been doing some drugs before the holidays started. They do have an effect in helping me forget a lot I used to remember, so I don't recall too much about Edward Snowden. But Edward Joseph Snowden, thank you to my executive producer, the man who's still in a Moscow airport. Here's this dumb son of a bitch who never did shit in his entire life. He was in Hawaii, the same state where my Princess of the Pacific lives, earning well over several $1 million a year. Who, because he had earned that through the Temple of Set, they called on their debts, and he wound up having to hemorrhage a leak, a controlled leak on behalf of Mr. Michael Aquino, so they could make him a hero, exposing jack shit worth nothing in allegiance with the rapist Julian Assange, a man who has spoken in Putinista terms about females being inferior before he attempted to rape 2 of them at once and wound up seeking shelter in the Ecuadorian embassy. So Oliver Stone directed a movie called Snowden, presenting Snowden as a big whistleblower. Such a hero, they made action figures of Edward Snowden for your kids to play with. I'm not shitting you. Look up action figures for Ed Snowden on internet. You'll find him. And that's when, still butt fucked, with Michael Aquino's cock 3 inches up inside his ass, Oliver Stone had to go to Russia to propagandize Vladimir Putin by promoting him as the savior of all mankind. So, from an actual interview with American director Oliver Stone, forced into the role of pro-Russian propagandist, because his son dared regurgitate unwisely and impractically misquotations from myself. Sean Stone himself was so fucked over he converted to Islam. And his daddy winds up in front of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who's telling him on camera and on record he doesn't have any bad days because he's not a woman. He explained this, there be natural cycles, certain natural cycles. Now, Russian Vladimir Putin, the president of motherfucking Russia, has always had, let's go with psychotic, views on women. But some of his latest comments in that documentary, the last time I checked, I'm sure he said plenty offensive since. But what he said in that documentary of Oliver Stone's was exceptionally offensive enough where that was all I ever needed to hear ever again. So in that 4-part series that aired on Showtime on June 12th through the 15th, back in 2017, the year before yesteryear, the American filmmaker Oliver Stone talked to Putin about a range of subjects, from the president's daily routine to his account of Edward Snowden's defection to Russia. And Will's Foreign Policy magazine wrote that the documentary will teach you a little about Putin and nothing about Russia. What it did was capture the Russian leader making snide, chauvinistic comments about women every motherfucking day. In just one example, for instance, at one point, while taking Stone through the Kremlin's throne room, Putin tells Oliver Stone, I don't have bad days as a president because I'm not a bitch. Then follows this up with false, pseudoscientific explanation. I'm not trying to insult anyone. That's just the nature of things. There be certain natural cycles. And in another charming moment from the interview, Putin denies that there's any discrimination against gay people in Russia, which there be by state mandate, but adds that he isn't comfortable showering next to a gay man because he wouldn't want to provoke him. In other words, excite him. And then quickly pointed out that he's a judo master, which implied an obvious threat of violence. Now, these comments in and of themselves may be hard to stomach, but they're hardly out of character considering the kinds of things Putin has said and done as Russia's leader throughout his bloody and infamous career, throughout his sordid professional existence. In 2014, if I remember correctly, he made headlines in the United States for how he responded to Hillary Rodham Clinton's criticism of Russia's annexation of Crimea by force of arms. Putin said, when people push boundaries too far, it's not because they be strong, but because they be weak. But maybe weakness is not the worst quality for a woman. And the year before that, 2013, Putin, referencing a protest staged by topless women from the activist group Femen, said, I liked it. I didn't catch what they were shouting. I didn't even see if they were blondes, brunettes, or chestnut-haired. I just looked at their tits, bounce up and down. So, the last time I checked, what to me, in personal experience, to exposure to an open running sewer called Vladimir Putin, his latest behavioral quirk, his frankly exhausted suggestion that women be less able to do their jobs because of their menstrual cycles, be just one more example of his particular brand of misogyny, smug, demeaning, backhanded, infinitely condescending. It might be easy to brush off these comments until you remember that they reflect the attitudes of a man with a profound degree of limitless, infinite power. In February of the year before yesteryear, 2017, Putin signed a horrifying law decriminalizing domestic abuse, which in Russia and elsewhere disproportionately victimizes woman and woman alone, exclusively, as a matter of fact. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, reported that estimates from police data, that which we even know of, betray evidence that over 600 Russian women are already being killed in their homes every single month of the fucking year. And it be concluded that the number must be orders of magnitude beyond that. This is just what is released by Russian constabularies. That which never be reported, women buried in their backyards, etc., are never investigated. And Putin didn't want any money spent on such. So since already about 1,200 women die every single month in Russia, the number will double to 2,400, 2,400 women a month, at least, in Russia dying, which would add to scores of thousands in a year. As a matter of fact, if we tried to do the numbers on that, 2,400 times 12, that would essentially bring us to 30,000 women dying every year in motherfucking Russia. And that would still be understated. Under the new law enforced by Vladimir Putin, a man can kill his mother, his sister, his daughter, his girlfriend, any female intimate or relation, his wife, of course, as a given, and will not be prosecuted. The Russian state has no money to pursue investigations for violence against women. Putin's approval of this law be a devastating reminder that when people in positions of power hold regressive views of women, the consequences be catastrophic. Now, we're getting another observation from our man, Daniel Arola, our brother in battle sayist, that Putin is ranked as a black belt in the Russian grappling sport of Sambo, Russia's judo. Thank you. Yes, that is an important point. Russia has, of course, their own indigenous martial arts. This was a translation, yes, of Oliver Stone, where I didn't have a choice to view it in the native Russian. And at any rate, Oliver Stone, of course, Americanizing it for American audiences, translated as judo. Indeed, there were several parts where Vladimir Putin was speaking English, and he says terms like that. But Daniel's absolutely correct. What he really means is the Russian art of Sambo. Now, of course, let me try and personalize this a bit. As a person who has had to pass himself as a member of the feminine gender for a good part of his life, I can tell, if I were speaking to Vlad directly, I would insist that women have bad days, but it's not because of cycles. And I'll tell you one thing that improves the quality of my days, Mr. Putin, that I'm not a woman who lives in the kind of Russia you've been building. And I'm not obligated to comport myself as one in the both gynophobic and homophobic world which you aspire to build. Now, women do get grumpy, Vlad, but as a person who has had to pass as one for a good part of my life, I can tell you nature has a lot less to do with it than you think. I'm not sure what natural cycles Vlad be talking about, but he most certainly be making some oblique and queasy reference to menstruation. And the mind boggles as to just what provoked Vlad to do so and forcibly affirm such to Oliver Stone on the basis of his own issues, rendered so open and bleeding for his gender identity and the fact that it wasn't his Shark Week. I mean, surely all the bare-chested horse riding and military expansionism and state-sponsored terrorism should have been enough to convince Oliver Stone that Vladimir Putin be the manliest man of men, man-manning maleness in the worldwide history of Wang. But unrelated, Vlad also told Stone he wouldn't shower with a gay man and added, "Why provoke him? But, you know, I'm a judo master." You know, it's a scenario that our manly man Vlad seems to have thought through with a very strange level of detail. Of course, men with other men being manly is on his mind a lot. It's his whole fucking lame-ass act to appeal to white trash pride worldwide. How else could Putin be unaware that women don't actually have bad days as he imagines them? I mean, yes, sure. Once a month, I personally know a young female escort biologically compromised by bleeding and devastating pain. But that has more to do with a traditionally male-dominated medical establishment's profound lack of interest in her disease of endometriosis. Her cycle was not, so she finally learned, after 15 years of missed diagnoses, her cycle was not natural. So women do get grumpy, Vlad. But nature has a lot less to do with it. It has a lot more to do with being stereotyped, dismissed, humiliated, structurally disadvantaged, underpaid, exploited, abused, subjugated, pussy grabbed, denied legal control of their own bodies, beaten, raped, and abandoned, all on basis of gender. And then informed that their disquiet, discomfort, or rage be a matter of natural cycles. To quotist, the Vlad, I'm not trying to insult anyone. That's just the nature of things. So, the one thing that improves the quality of any female Vladimir, or any female impersonator as myself, be that I don't have to comport myself as such, and no American woman who affiliates with me is forced by circumstance to live in the shithole empire of motherfucking Russia that you've been building out of dung heaps. Vladimir Putin's absolute power, his Panamanian bank accounts, and his public trolling of that hapless clown destroying America named Donald Trump betray he's having a dandy time. But the human rights reports expose it's not so rosy for any of my beloved sisters in struggle over there behind the new Iron Curtain of Putinista pride. There's the reality that Russian women do the majority of the work because the men are motherfucking useless. Your average Russian man is worse than a white trash piece of shit. He's an alcoholic microbe on a microscope slab. So the Russian women do all the work, the majority thereof for the minority of pay. That, of course, happens everywhere. But Vladimir Putin's outspokenly Islamophobic government can't even be bothered to police female genital mutilation when the practice be rife in the Northern Caucasus. There be so few laws that protect women's rights in the motherfucking so-shame motherland Then there's the law passed only just the year before yesteryear in 2017 that eliminates all legal sanctions against men who beat their female partners to point of murder and beyond, or any female relations they wish. The world learned from representatives in Vladimir Putin's own government that in Putin's Russia, where it be officially acknowledged that a woman dies every 40 minutes from domestic abuse, the official Russian governmental response to that officially acknowledged statistic that a woman dies every 40 minutes in Russia from domestic abuse, the state response is, if he beats you, it means he loves you. But there was only one time, Vladimir, while I was passing as a bitch, comporting myself as female in a high-risk situation, that I was hit by a man. And it certainly didn't feel like love. It felt like a fist, a clenched bone, smashing the tissues of my face. Curious as that is, that man died that minute. And if you were ever in front of me, you little Slavic faggot, I would tear your testicles off with my teeth. You hear that, Putin? Suck my dick. Even if I'm wearing a dress. I'd rip your ass apart. Now all this gynophobia, before we even explore what on earth is going on culturally, in the country that once produced such kick-ass babes as Rosa Shanina, Vasilisa Kozhnina, or Kojina, depending on the regional dialect, Valentina Tereshkova, Katerina the Great, the German woman who created the Russian Empire. In any modern sense, by importing Germans to civilize and industrialize a forest wilderness. All academic analysis suggests woman's social capital there be now more valued for extreme performance of femininity, rather than such meaningless achievements as fighting off invaders, repelling Napoleon Bonaparte, space exploration, or building the empire on whose ruins Vladimir Putin merely plunders. Hence attendance at housewife school, or girls going to Siberia for beautifying operations, where their legs be broken and stretched. Sure, it could be a choice, but I know that when teenage Russian girls sing songs in churches about feminism, they go on to serve hard time. Now that, little faggot Vladimir, that be woman having a really bad day. Every day's a bad day if you're a woman in Russia. But you don't need to encumber yourself understanding it, Vlad. You're an autocrat who's manipulated both a fledgling democracy into a gangster fiefdom, and it be damningly evident by your cyber hacks you be personally responsible for corrupting a somewhat more establishing democracy, one established for at least a longer period of time than you ever dreamed of. You've turned a constitutional republic called the United States into a circus sideshow in suits via all-out cybernetic assault and virtual occupation. You've assumed for yourself the power of life and death over millions, not only in Eurasia, but here in North America. Why, Vlad, your authority is so complete, you could choose to have your critics disappeared and murdered on a whim. And haven't we, the critical, the suffering, and the powerless been made to know it via thy puppet Trump. Which brings me back to our domestic war against woman with Donald John Trump as its chief executive officer and commander-in-chief. It be evident, and I use that term in disambiguation from appearance. It's not apparent, it is evident that Donald Trump, the man who brags about assaulting women and jails children to act as a deterrent, that he is beyond the monstrous nature of your average serial killer or serial rapist. No surprise, but in a stunning abuse of power last Friday, the date I can give you was the 1st of February. And opening up the first day of the second month, this 2019th year of our Lord, Donald John Trump quietly rolled back half a century of woman's protection in one fell swoop by significantly altering the Department of Justice definitions of domestic violence and sexual assault. The DOJ Gender Protection Regulations. The laws protecting women from American male violence. No one in these United States knows why he did this, aside myself. What everyone does know is that no one asked him to do this. Not one legislator or official has ever complained that our domestic violence definition was too protective. So no American asked him to do this. Now, furthermore, I read Slate Online magazine a lot. It covers current affairs, politics, and culture in the United States from a liberal progressive perspective. It was created in 1996 by the former New Republic editor Michael Kinsley, initially under the ownership of Microsoft as part of MSN. And as Slate magazine points out, what's especially confusing to their investigators be the fact that the Department of Justice is specifically tasked with funding and implementing solutions on all kinds of domestic violence, not just the prosecution of individuals. In other words, they provide educational courses in violence against women for men that they may rehabilitate them, and courses for women that they may seek help. So Slate magazine couldn't understand why Donald John Trump erased all those laws protecting American women. But I can expose 3 immediate reasons, aside from the orders he received from Vladimir Putin. But before I get to that, let's look at what Trump removed from the definitions of the Department of Justice. First, be domestic violence. After years of study, the previous definition used by the DOJ, the Department of Justice, was put in place with input from criminal justice organizations and vetted by experts on domestic violence. The key here be that domestic violence is not just about hitting somebody. This was pulled, what I have before me, I got printed out from a web archive of the Department of Justice. It's no longer accessible. You cannot get your own copy. The old definition before the first day of this month, February 2019, read as follows. We define domestic violence as a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that be used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame, hurt, injure, or wound someone. Physical abuse, hitting, slapping, shoving, grabbing, pinching, biting, hair pulling, etc. are types of physical abuse. This type of abuse also includes denying a partner medical care or forcing alcohol and or drug abuse or drug use upon he or her. Sexual abuse, coercing or attempting to coerce any sexual contact or behavior without consent. Sexual abuse includeth, but be certainly no limited to, marital rape, attacks on sexual parts of the body, forcing sex after physical violence has occurred, or treating one in a sexually demeaning manner. Emotional abuse, undermining an individual's sense of self-worth and or self-esteem be abusive. This may include, but be no limited to, constant criticism, diminishing one's abilities, name-calling, or damaging one's relationship with his or her children. Economic abuse, be defined as making or attempting to make any individual financially dependent by maintaining total control over financial resources, withholding one's access to money, or forbidding one's attendance at school or employment. Psychological abuse. Elements of psychological abuse include, but be no limited to, causing fear by intimidation, threatening physical harm to self, partner, children, or partner's family or friends, destruction of pets and property, and forcing isolation from family, friends, or school and or work. Domestic violence can happen to anyone, regardless of race, age, sexual orientation, religion, or gender. Domestic violence affects people of all socioeconomic backgrounds and education levels. Domestic violence occurs in both opposite sex and same-sex relationships and can happen to intimate partners who be married, living together, or simply dating. Domestic violence not only affects those who be abused, but also has a substantial effect on family members, friends, co-workers, other witnesses, and the community at large. Children who grow up witnessing domestic violence be among those seriously affected by this crime. Frequent exposure to violence in the home not only predisposes children to numerous social and physical problems, but also teaches them that violence be a normal way of life, therefore increasing their risk of becoming society's next generation of victims and abusers. Okay, all of that I'm reading verbatim. That's no longer there. Now, I present unto you the new Trump definition on the Department of Justice website. Per Donald John Trump, and I quote this verbatim. The term domestic violence includes felony or misdemeanor crimes of violence committed by a former or current spouse or intimate partner of the victim, by a person with whom the victim shares a child in common, by a person who be cohabitating with or has cohabitated with the victim as a spouse or intimate partner, by a person similarly situated to a spouse of the victim under the domestic or family violence laws of the jurisdiction receiving grant monies, or by any other person against an adult or youth victim who be protected from that person's acts under the domestic or family violence laws of the jurisdiction. Now, this goes back to the days before the Amber Alert Reformation. Back in the day, you could have a child abducted in any city in the United States, and more often than not, that child would be a child of visitors or tourists not native to the area. either international tourists or domestic Americans. So when the parents would go to the police and say, our child's missing, we turned around, she was gone. The police would say, well, where are you from? Well, we're from New York. Well, the person would say, this is Los Angeles, motherfucker. Tough tit. Not our jurisdiction. See, you're residents of New York, so your child called the New York City Police Department, but she was abducted here in Los Angeles. Tough shit. Not our problem. Less work for us, less money for our taxpayers. Go fuck yourself. So by the time that the FBI was brought in, the National Investigative Department of the United States, the child was always raped and dead. So because the child 100% of the time, 100% died violently, finally, a bunch of mothers whose children had been raped to death, tortured to death, conclusively so because the films all wound up on the deep net, the dark web, downloaded again and again by men masturbating over it. The mothers brought that as evidence and got the Supreme Court to install the Amber Alert system. So it didn't matter where a child was abducted. It automatically meant the city theoretically has got to stop. And the cops and everybody are on the alert till this child is found. It's not an issue of jurisdiction. It's an issue of humanity. Trump has taken us back to the jurisdiction days. What about sexual assault? This was the old definition. Sexual assault be any type of sexual contact or behavior that occurs without the explicit consent of the recipient. Falling under the definition of sexual assault be sexual activities as forced sexual intercourse, forcible sodomy, child molestation, incest, fondling, and attempted rape. I will now read unto you the new Donald John Trump definition. The term sexual assault means any non-consensual sexual act proscribed by federal, tribal, or state law, including when the victim lacks capacity to consent. Notice Donald Trump personally, this isn't someone under the Trump administration, this is Trump himself, removed any reference to child molestation. So that Roy Moore will never spend a day in jail. He removed any reference to incest and fondling via Donald John Trump himself, so he will never spend a day in jail. And he removed any and all references to attempted rape via the Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. So Kavanaugh will never spend a day in jail. Now, those could be taken as 3 reasons unto themselves. But why did Trump do this from any more contextual perspective than just sheer release from responsibility on an interpersonal level? There are 3 reasons that I and I alone can expose. Domestically, there be multiple allies, associates, endorsements, and appointments that have been either derailed, raked over the coals, or booted out for sexual assault or domestic violence. Trump has fiercely defended every one of them and always attacks and or blames the victims. This be his form of payback. And secondly, Trump knows very sordid details are about to come to light. He is being investigated 6 ways from Sunday, and we know from multiple allegations of abuse and his own words that sexual violence be the very essence of what he be. This is how he identifies himself as a man, like Vladimir Putin. This be an attempt to blunt an upcoming charge towards both he and the Skeevy Jr., one of his rampant, errant, serial rapist sons. And tertiarily, because this move immediately followed Donald John Trump's ban on migrant domestic violence victims from being awarded asylum and rolling back Title IX protections for collegiate sexual assault victims, because Donald John Trump just really devalues women that fucking much. While I provide us the reasons, the effects be catastrophic. These limited definitions will restrict community grants to fight domestic and sexual abuse, meaning that many victims will not be able to get the services they so sorely need, nor their children. This also means that prosecutions will be limited solely to physical violence. So many victims will have an impossible time coming forward and will be forever trapped in horrid, abusive relationships until they finally are killed. As Holly Taylor Doon put it, who has worked in the field of domestic violence for 17 years, it's a massive step backwards. We have literally gone back to the 1970s. Well, let me tell you something. As an individual who sought psychiatric counseling myself for my post-traumatic stress disorder, I can inform you there be more than 18 million victims who visit a mental health care clinic every year due to domestic violence. We have so many reasons to defeat Russia's Trump in 2020. You can now add 18 million more. Those people will no longer have assets. Now, I think that I've covered quite a bit before I retreat into my celebration of the Asian Lunar New Year. I'm going to keep you all fairly well posted. And I'm very appreciative of those of you who weathered tonight. But I don't think I can emphasize enough why this should contextualize my ambivalence about the woman in Congress acknowledging anything from Donald John Trump. We have, in the person of Donald John Trump, under direct orders from Vladimir Putin, doing what he can to enforce the situation that Putin has made law in Russia, to disempower men to the point where the only power they have be over the females in their immediate environment, whom they are given not only every right to beat, abuse, and sexually exploit at their women caprice, but ultimately kill, sans any fear of retribution, with total impunity. If any of you retain any delusion that Vladimir Putin has not occupied the United States, that you are not under occupation, that your fantasy world of the man in the high castle, your fear is, oh, thank God we won World War II. Otherwise, the Krauts and the Japs would have us on our knees. You could only pray that the Reichsarians and the Nipponjin would even stoop to soil their boots on your filthy soil to liberate you from what you suffer now, to save you from the pig fucking Russians. until we overthrow the Putinista regime and install a matriarchy. All Russians are to be viewed as fucking pigs deserving of death. Death that they wish on you. You're living in Putin's world. And it's the man on Russian Hill, the son of Adolf Hitler, that can pull you out of this. In this year of the landslide mud pig wallowing in shit. If you don't recognize that in time, you're going to die. Pull your head out of your ass, whether you've got a cunt between your legs or a cock. Your future's been stolen by Vladimir Putin. He runs your world with infinite power. He assassinates people in other nations, deploying weapons of mass destruction, taking out the tax-paying citizens of supposedly sovereign states. All of this approved by the same white trash Republicans who claim that they're here to protect your sovereignty. All the white trash Suru shit, all the independents, all the Republicans, they're here to take away your sovereignty, to live under the slavery of motherfucking Russia because they feel it's better to live under the rule of white trash across the Atlantic, across the Bering Strait, under Eurasia, than to surrender to the inevitable of a new race walking the earth, born of all Americans, hybridized as unto myself, the race of the future, a universal race of North America, which can be the light to the world in terms of peace enforcement as we move into a truly new world order of separate but equal ethnicities and cultures, maintaining their own essential purity, but interacting with a universal monitor of peoples that represent all peoples by their very genetics, sourcing out of North America. To preempt that future, the white trash sewer shit coming out of Eurasia has flooded into America based on their Republican insurgency, which must be outlawed as we outlawed the Communist Party. And all its constituents deported, those in Dixie severed from the body politic by not allowing them to secede, demanding that they do so. The South is a cesspit sewer of filth that must be like a cancer excised from the body of North America. Those blacks in the South that decide to stay must be protected by peacekeeping forces. Let the white trash dominate what they may. Those blacks that no longer want to stay in Dixieland must be provided all possible assistance in nation building, in a North African project that will expand the concept once embodied by biological dump sites like Sierra Leone, where the British dumped all their slave population, and Liberia, where the Americans dumped theirs, into something that's actually assisted and sponsored by our union to expand into the Sahara and modernize it in a true reclamation of Africa. The tragedy of which on that continent be that the majority of Africa is not black. all of the North be dominated by the old Arab slave states, all the way from Egypt through Maghreb. The creation of a new black political entity in the Sahara would be a major change in race relations of the world, making Africa more black as majority than it had ever been before. It would be a historical building upon or expansion on the original Marcus Garvey movements for a return to Africa by those who so willed it, to create a modern black civilization out of the desert. With American support, it would not be impossible at all. A Black Africa Corps. And in terms of what we have here in America, in order to protect a basic universal income for all women, so they won't be not only exploited by the pink tax, but have enough money to care for their children without being forced to find employment. We must institute a draft of all females, barring, of course, certain exceptions, the majority of females prior the age of 18, as it was in Vietnam, when we sent men to kill before they were of age to vote. So too, when a girl reaches the age of 16, she must be drafted for at least a year into a United States police force. That would, of course, enforce laws in all major cities where our majority population be, as a kind of expanded National Guard on a military level against any people who would raise their prices to siphon off whatever profits women would have from a basic universal income. Much of our abortions, or the need for them, would be eliminated by that. To prevent women from being gouged, a United States police force constituted exclusively of females would make that a reality that couldn't be corrupted or perverted. So in terms of solutions, in terms of actual practical ideas, this is where your future source is from. The man on Russian Hill, the head of resistance in this reality where you're under occupation, divided between the Russians and the Satanists, and being indoctrinated to think your biggest fear is still the Axis powers, which is why your motherfucking Russian puppet president has to start his State of Disunion speech by not bringing up World War II and D-Day and the Nazi enemy, but actually plucking out of his audience 2 living fossils, 2 human relics from World War II, a Holocaust survivor and some World War II GI, to parade as an example of these are the men who saved us from the man in the high castle scenario. Well, the man on Russian Hill, the son of Adolf Hitler, is here to tell you your only hope for the future is to get out of that fantasy world and realize you're under occupation of the Russians and the Satanists. You're talking about Donald Trump, the same man who all you dumb white trash pieces of shit said was going to break up all the human trafficking rings, was going to save all the children from Pizzagate, who eliminated a definition of incest and child molestation and pedophilia from your Department of Justice regulations in order to protect those very rings that they may expand like a cancer. God damn you. If you support Donald Trump, you're as bad as he is. You are not to be shown an inch of mercy any more than you would show to a child being raped by Donald Trump, Roy Moore, or Kavanaugh. You're just a fellow criminal. Mass deportation, forced severance, and secession. For those in the Solid South, these are the solutions that provide answers. And I think I'm being far too merciful because all you white trash pieces of shit who support Donald Trump deserve a slow death. You should be skinned alive and constantly reawakened with smelling salts, hung over a slow flame to suffer some of what you want to do with your own children, like Donald Trump did with his, raping his own daughter. It's almost certain that because Jared Kushner is a transgender who listed himself as female on all his voting forms for years, that transgender individual can't even produce children. All the children between he and Trump's daughter are products of her incestuous union with Donald Trump. There's the reality of the world which you live in, what all you white trash male pieces of shit want. The ability to propagate your continuity on this plane of existence by direct extension. Producing your own grandchildren directly by fucking your own daughters, like your president. May you all burn in hell eternal. And until we send you there, you can do your best to try and silence myself. But even with as few people as know of me now, it'll be impossible to stop the mud flood that my former stalker hinted of. Michael Aquino's own acolyte and sorcerer's apprentice, Heather Holman, when she introduced tonight's topic with just that single word. My love unto all who stand beside me or behind me. May the most grievous of misfortunes befall upon those who stand before us. And of course, join us again on Sunday night for further information, further education, and your next beating. Take care and be well. And happy Lunar New Year.